Hello, everyone. Thank you to all speakers and the discussant, as well as all participants for tuning in into GE 2020, Our Youth, Our Future. So it is a wonderful Saturday morning. Everything is bright and sunny. That is great. And here we are with discussing an important topic about that more or less looks at mapping on the future of Singapore. So we would also like to thank Regional Working Group for hosting us and giving us the webinar space. The Regional Working Group, MARUAH, is a member of the Regional Working Group. The Secretariat HQ is based in Manila. And as the Regional Working Group, we look at ASEAN and human rights within ASEAN. Also like to thank EXCO members, Ben, whom you have been liaising with a lot, and Rafisti as the organizing committee for this. MARUAH is a human rights organization. We are non-partisan when it comes to political parties, but we are aligned to any political party that also has an emphasis on human rights and the rights of people. And also today, I think the environment is playing a bigger and important role: civic, political rights, economic rights, social and cultural. Okay, to the topic of the, before I go there, I need to tell you that this is being recorded and that we will be speaking or asking the speakers in alphabetical order, and that we hope anyone who has questions, we hope you do. There is right at the bottom of the screen Q&A, a reaction or a chat box. You could put your questions in the chat box if you like. Because of the time, we are a little bit tight, so hopefully we will be able to to take on at least 2 or 3 of your questions. This is also available to those who did not register on Facebook, and you could go on to Facebook for the recording. So why are we doing this, MARUAH? The largest in our population, right, among the those who are eligible to be considered as voters, the largest age group right now is aged between 45 and 49 years. By 2050, in another 30 years, half the population will be aged 65 and above. We are all the whole future is pointing towards changing dynamics and how we operate, how we are going to systemize, and how we will map our futures. In 30 years, it means that we would have had at least about 6 general elections by that time. Right now, the results in a nutshell: we have 10 elected opposition party members and 2 NC MPs among 93 members of parliament, all coming from 14 SMCs and 17 GRCs, except for the 2 NC MPs. The ruling party, People's Action Party, lost some of their key members, and current DPM, Ms. Heng Swee Keat, came in with a 53% electoral margin. Tanjong Pagar, which is a stronghold, saw a swing of 14 percentage points against the ruling party. And there was quite a bit of a shakeabout in the western side of Singapore, especially in areas like West Coast, Bukit Panjang, Bukit Batok. Overall, the PAP, the ruling party, so vote share became 61.2%. Social media use was rampant and also very strategic, depending on which political party knew how to work it to its maximum. The electorate is seen as a younger group today that is more discerning, more interested in relating to the social media, and also it looks like they are asking for fairer competition, good governance, However, till today, the research doesn't show that it was the younger electorate that caused a shift. So therefore, across board, there are various touch points, various points of anxiety that I hope in the coming times as research pans out, we would know what age group, what socioeconomic band, etc., brought about the shifts. So today we are going to look at appeal to the younger political candidates to see what are the plans over at least 2 general elections, right, within 5 to 10 years. What are their plans for their own growth, for their own engagement with the population, what they hope the population would put forward, their political parties and with the government. So today that is what we are hoping to do. There are changes already in government. A leader of opposition has been appointed, and that is the Workers' Party Secretary General, Mr. Pritam Singh. We have heard Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong speak on National Day, hold his National Day rally, and we saw a very interesting parliament where there were very interesting discussion, a very pertinent discourse that came about on voter behavior, whether there are free riders, and that no one has actually a monopoly on compassion, which I think is an understood fact, and that there was also a very incisive platform that a leader of opposition, Mr. Pritam Singh, carved for himself the role that he would like to play in Parliament. So we are at really interesting times. So thank you for giving your time, every political candidate who took part in an exciting 2020, and much gratitude to Professor Kenneth Paul Tan for giving his time today to be a discussant. So we start officially today's forum, online forum, and the first part, we would ask each speaker to do a short introduction to yourself, and we will we have sent out the bio briefs and all through the posters as well as online to the participants. So could you please start, Ms. Vigneswari? Unmute.
All right, so this is the intro, right?
Yeah, yourself, about you.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm Vigneswari. I'm 38 years old, as in 38, and I have been a Singaporean all my life. I was born here, and I've been through the education system. I studied in Singapore till university level. So I'm a preschool teacher for 12 years, and I don't know, a lot of people think that it's an easy job. It's definitely not an easy job for me, especially when they pay me like above 3K. So I'm always the higher paid one in whichever school I've joined. So it comes with challenges that I think a lot of people are not aware of, the challenges faced by higher paying preschool teachers. It definitely comes with a cost. And I'm actually here to talk about mainly the education system from the operator's point of view, the parents' point of view, the teacher's point of view, as well as the children's point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. And you will have more time later in the program to come back to something that you really wish to say and how you're planning to make that become as real as possible. Thank you. Next, could we hear from Terence soon?
Thank you, Brema. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Terence Soon. I'm 30 years old, currently a pilot with Singapore Airlines, and I contested in Tanjong Pagar GRC in the recent general elections. And I am from the Progress Singapore Party, the PSP. You know, when it was first started, right, it was started by Dr. Tan Cheng Bock and his whole bunch of slightly more senior people. So there's this saying whereby people call PSP the grandfather's army. But I'm very glad to say that, you know, since a few months ago, since the GE especially, what has changed? now we're seeing a lot of young people who join the PSP. So young people meaning those 35 years and below, right? That's the definition for our youth wing. So we're not looking at dozens of people, we're not looking at 100 people, but we're looking at hundreds of young people who have joined PSP now. So we're no more a grandfather's army right now, and yeah, that's a very good thing. That's a good change to see in Singapore politics. Yeah, and that's for me, Brema. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soon. Terence, I'm all this grandfather's army coming in. Wow, okay, thank you. Next, could we hear from Mr. Nicholas Tang, please?
Thank you, Brema. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Tang. I'm 28 this year. I'm a member of Red Dot United, and I stood as their candidate in Jurong GRC for this year's general elections. Fairly new to the political scene. I've only joined since last year, but I've always been interested in politics and social issues. I do think that participation in civil discourse is the duty of every Singaporean. A little bit about the party. Red Dot United is a fairly new party, having formed only 3 months ago. We are the youngest party in Singapore. We want to introduce a new type of politics, politics focused on ideas and processes, and less focus around cults of personality. One of the main goals of RDU is to foster an active citizenry, and the youth certainly play a large part in that. We want each and every citizen to feel comfortable to participate in civil discourse and take part in the national conversation in topics which are of interest to them. We are still growing as a party, and we welcome anyone who believes in our cause and wants to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, Mr. Tang. Right, could I please ask Mr. Charles Yeo now, please?
A very good morning to Ms. Brema Meiti. My name is Charles, and I was a candidate for the Reform Party in Ang Mo Kio GRC. I am 30 years old this year. By way of profession, I am a lawyer. Okay. So the main reason why I joined the Reform Party is because I really believe in the concept that, you know, economic growth is illusory unless there is political checks and balances to ensure that the supposed economic growth trickles down to each and every member of the society. The reason why I use the term each and every member of the society is because I believe in this concept of the inherent dignity of man, whereby, you know, really since pretty young, I often discuss about the idea to end off what I would be the message I try to present. It is that there is a certain baseline floor for each and every member of the society, and we cannot have a society where people are treated too shabbily simply based on their lack of contribution or their lack of status generally in the relevant hierarchical tiers of the society, which it is argued that Singapore is a society that is increasingly moving towards such very strong, very deep fault lines, even more than.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles Yeo. Can we please hear from Min Cheong, please?
Hi, morning.
Yep.
Hi, so I'm Min. I am 35 and I contested in Holland Bukit Timah GRC in GE2020. I'm a marketing communication strategist, and during this GE I was really heartened to see a lot more conversations, you know, that young people engaged in, not just online, but also, you know, in person. When we did our walkabouts and our house visits, you know, we had a lot more younger voters who came up to us, who spoke to us about their concerns. And one of the areas that I'm really passionate about is what I call workforce wellness. I've spoken a little bit about this during the elections. And it really is a way to look at how we live and work and how to reform that. You know, going across socioeconomic sustainability, job creation and innovation, career empowerment, personal well-being, as well as organizational culture, which I think is something that a lot of young people are very concerned about. We spend so much of our lives at work. And, you know, this is something where I think a lot of people in our age group and even beyond, I mean, it's something that it affects all of us, right? But in particular, I've I've received a lot of communication, a lot of emails and messages from people, millennials in our age group, who are very, very concerned about the kind of culture that we are perpetuating, or the kind of culture that we are unfortunately having to contend with. So, you know, and I think this is an area where a lot of young people want to contribute to, not just politically as well, but, you know, because everything extends beyond just your personal sphere, and politics is not just a topic in itself, but it really is, you know, it's life, and it covers different areas of life. And I think this is what young people recognize, that it's not an isolated topic, politics. And in order to secure the future that we want, we need to look at politics differently, which is, it affects every area of our life. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Min Cheong. I really appreciate that all the speakers have tried their best to keep within the time. I know it is hard because there are many things you wish to say. But before I move to the other part, may I please ask Prof. Kenneth Tan, would you like to say something about yourself? Kenneth, are you there? Yes, thank you.
I should unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Kenneth Paul Tan. I've been working as a professor at the National University of Singapore for 20 years, mainly as a political scientist, and I spent a lot of time thinking about Singapore's political system, but also to think about how politics affects many other spaces, as Min Cheong just mentioned, I think quite rightly. So I also think about things like cinema, television, the arts, and how those things are intrinsically political as well. So I'm really looking forward to learning from all the views and insights that our panelists will very generously share with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Kenneth Tan. I think we are, everyone is making time for this, because I do think from Parliament sitting just 2 days ago, we are seeing that we have to be engaged, and MARUAH has always held GE forums, either pre or post, and this time it is happening 2 months later, and we decided let's get the newer political candidates to come and share their concepts and their ideas. Just on a footnote to say that MARUAH also wrote to the People's Action Party, inviting them, as well as the Workers' Party, because we identified political parties that had people who had had candidates below the age of 40. So that, Workers' Party very kindly gave us their reasons and declined, and maybe the next time we will hear from the People's Action Party, even if it is a decline, you know. So now we move to the next part of the discussion. I'm most excited about this part, and we have prepared our speakers for this. We are just going to throw topics up. And because this is now virtual, if it is a physical room, I can see a hand go up. So Ms. Laika in Philippines and Mr. Benedict in Singapore, hopefully speakers, when you put your hand up, I will be able to zoom in onto you and unmute your phone, say it succinctly, and because I have a lot of topics. So in the time frame, I want to throw as many of these topics as possible. So keep it precise, then we can go through more topics. But the topics are not frivolous. They are also based on how you have introduced yourself. What are some of the, I heard words like dignity, I heard words like progress, certain core issues have come up. So we are all aligned, and I hope we would all work together on this so that we can see how many we can cover. So anyone who puts the hand up first, the first one is coming up for you, and that is about, once I get all my papers a bit more organized, it is about leadership within political parties. Hand up, anyone?
Okay, I'll put my
Thank
hand up
you,
then.
Terence.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Brema, can I ask what part about leadership in the
Up to
political party
you.
do you mean?
Up to you. It's a rapid response. I'm not going to elaborate how you respond.
Okay.
That's it. Yep.
Okay, sure. Well, I definitely think that, look, in public service especially, a leader has to be a servant. That's always first and foremost. So, um, within our party, and I'm sure same goes for many other parties, we see the leaders, right, be it the chairman, the secgen, they're always down there serving the people, right? We're always out there doing walkabouts, understanding the needs of people, and that's something very essential. And for anybody who is thinking of joining a political party, I think one of the most important things to think about is it doesn't matter whether you are a multi-millionaire, you're a billionaire, you are, I don't know, a CEO or whatever. But when you come in, we all come in as equals, right? We all come in on the same level standing. So you have to have the heart to serve in order to join something. But again, if you don't have that kind of heart, but you have that kind of money, then by all means, that's what a political party needs as well. But in terms of other leadership, right, especially since this is more a youth webinar, I think we have to understand that youths are not the leaders of tomorrow. They are not only the leaders of tomorrow, youths are also the leaders of today, right? That's always a misconception that people have, that okay, yeah, you're young, you learn something now, and 10, 20 years later you become a certain leader. No, you start today, right? So very importantly, we have to give our youths, our young people, especially, I can only speak for PSP, right? Since I'm in there, right? Like since I'm heading the youth wing, okay. Since I'm heading the youth wing, we obviously want to give as many of our youths as much of an exposure as possible to lead their own program. So yeah, that's a part of leadership that I want to talk about. Sorry for taking too much time.
Very much, Terence. You have given openness. Anybody else jumping in? Otherwise, I'm going. Thanks, Charles. Short, sharp, sweet. Unmute, please. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to say that, I really agree with what a lot of our parents have said, but I have a further point to add. The point is that to me, leadership represents a person that is willing to go first. And the context of a leader should be, the correct ethos of a leader should be first man in and last man out. So leadership to me in the context of a political party means that you prove yourself by being willing to advocate the ideas or ideals of the political party fearlessly, and you are willing to suffer for the ideals of the political party. If depending on how radical the political party's agenda or on the social political, on the the political spectrum may be, leadership will definitely require you that you will require that you prove yourself, and it requires it requires you to put forward to really be the one that is willing to prove yourself to the rest of the party, and prove the party to the rest of the electorate in terms of your electability and your desire to suffer for your ideals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Sorry, yeah, I will do this once in a while because this is a rapid response. Sorry, yeah, folks. Yeah, but thank you. You made a very interesting point as well as Terence earlier. One used the word suffer and same level playing field. Anyone? That's the next topic. Suffer. Anyone wants to talk about suffering as a political party candidate or being involved in politics? And this is not peculiar just to any opposition political party. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, he too walked the same path. Mr. David Marshall walked through the same path. Mr. Lee Siew Choh walked through the same path. So what's the level of suffering that you are talking about? Anyone? Anyone? Any hand up when? Hello? Yes, Charles, all your...
I think I must elaborate since I'm the one who brought up the topic. Now, suffering can be defined widely. You see, first of all, Suffering may be defined as, on the lower end of the spectrum, it may be defined as being cut out entirely from perks or privileges that one may have by virtue of his being part of the establishment or one's original social hierarchy, socio-economic hierarchy in society. At the other end of the spectrum, it may be Jollivan's kind of suffering. Jollivan's suffering refers to his recent case whereby he was just released from prison after now Jollivan is not a member to my knowledge of any political party, but he views my stories, I view his, and I'm a big fan of Jollivan. I believe that Jollivan represents the kind of political change we need in our society. Recently, Jollivan, for making some comments previously, Jollivan for organizing a protest where he organized a protest where Joshua Wong, a leader of the democracy movement in Hong Kong, was invited to speak, and this was, somehow found. In the eyes of the Singapore law, this was considered organizing a protest, and Jollivan was sentenced to 7 days of jail, which his appeal was actually up. At the end of the day, this decision was upheld by the Court of Appeal. So Jollivan spent 7 days in prison. So these are the two spectrums of suffering. Yeah, but I'll leave you guys to share because I don't want to talk too much here. So do you guys agree that generally critics have suffered? That's the question I would.
Yeah, thank you. I think you raised a good point, Charles, which actually leads me to the next topic, civil society and the political sphere. How can politicians and civil society, what are your views about the role of civil society? Anyone, and short, sharp, fast, because there are many topics here. Hey, civil society. Hello, I'm from civil society. Anyone?
I was.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas first.
Yep. Hi. I think that everyone has a part to play in civil discourse. Like I said, that I think that every citizen has a part to play because politics affects every area of our lives, even if we don't want to admit it. If we board the bus and pay a bus fare, for example, now the bus fare is subject to politics as well. The cost of taking public transport. Now everyone's affected by this. So everyone has a right to talk in civil society. Everyone has a right to be heard. And I think this is what the government needs to do. They need to encourage conversation instead of shut it down. And in recent years, maybe the government has been trying to do that. But even things like Pink Dot and climate change rally, for example, the government has not been so encouraging in this. And I think the government needs to be more encouraging. Thanks.
Thank you. How would you work with civil society, politicians and civil society? Both Charles and Nicholas, you have raised some good examples about transportation, the issue about where is the freedom if you have an online virtual discussion with someone and then you end up paying the price of flouting the law and therefore spend time in prison. As a politician, what is the synergy between politics and civil society? Anyone? Is there a synergy? And if so, what it is? What are your views on this? Anyone? Whose hand went up? Thanks, Min Cheong. Or was that flicking your hair? Yes, please unmute.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, we need to understand that conflict and contention doesn't necessarily have to be combative. And it's really important to encourage a marketplace of views. It's important to hear, opposing perspectives out. And I think it's really crucial to encourage people to have conversations that are mature and that are sensible and are geared towards finding common ground. And even if not, it's really about, just pushing forth something that you believe in. So I think politicians need to be pretty authentic in understanding that we all are people and we all have certain issues that we're more passionate about, that are closer to our hearts. And we need to stick to our guns where this is concerned and just push forth. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be combative. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't need to result in arguments, and it shouldn't.
Min Cheong, sorry, was there another hand up? The next topic, okay, Nicholas, short, sharp, fast, thanks.
I think the relationship between the political party and civil society is one where the political party has to listen to civil society, because those are the voices on the ground. And I think those are the issues which everyone's interested in. If people are talking about it, the political party should be listening. It's okay for a political party to give thought leadership on issues, but at the same time, listening to the ground is important, because these are issues that are important to everyone. And that's the whole point of a political party, is to push for issues which is important for the general citizens. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. I like this. We're getting into it now. The next part, as a follow-up to what you all are sharing, right? What are the expectations one has of civil society as you're coming from the field of being in politics? How you have opened it to say that, yes, we must respect civil society and work with civil society, but what are you also expecting of civil society, and how would you support civil society? Yes, Charles?
I'm expecting, okay, I mean, I do not want to come across as flattering Ms. Brema, but I'm expecting some people, for me, I have the deepest respect for Ms. Brema. I think the way, in terms of how she has dedicated her life generally to serving civil society and campaigning for various causes is very noble. Now, this goes back to what I said earlier, whereby I echo the views of Nicholas, where he stated that civil society plays a very important, and he in fact is saying that, the government of the day should take a cue from civil society, because they are the people on the ground. Now, they are not only the people on the ground, but typically they are the voice for the voiceless. So let's use Madam Brema as an example. She has, throughout the course of her life, she has campaigned for various causes, including women, migrant workers, which is also a cause that John has campaigned for, and action for AIDS, and the list. And also, she was the founder of the Straits Times Pocket Money Fund. Now that corresponds to the group of needy children. The reason why civil society is so important is twofold in nature. The first is because they are a voice for the voiceless, but the second is that they are the vanguard of change. And if we look at historical examples like Emmeline Pankhurst, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, they were, at some point in time, people would consider them politicians, and they did stand for election, even William Wilberforce, for example, but they began as civil society activists. For example, the William Wilberforce was the first anti-slavery abolitionist who began, so I'll draw my point to a close now, because my point is that civil society activists are very important, and civil society is very important.
Thank you for understanding, Charles. I think more or less the bottom line is there needs to be greater synergies, is what I hear. And maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, and if it's wrong, please put your hand up again. There's a certain level of codependency as well as coming together, and if one doesn't agree, then just to keep moving. And I better stop on the civil society chapter, because otherwise people will accuse me of setting my own agenda here. No, it's just that I'm following what your responses and going in. The next thing that I want to ask, views, I'm very keen to hear. There's no elaboration. Who's the hero, your hero that you follow quite a lot? You don't have to tell me why. I just want the names. I'm curious. Anyone? Actually, everyone and anyone. Whose hand is going up first?
Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Does it have to be a Singaporean?
No, anyone. No elaboration, just the name.
Right. Okay, mine is Donald Trump.
Thank you.
Yeah, because
yes. I'm
Because,
curious. This me
yeah,
as a busybody, I would like to know why
yeah.
Donald
Because
Trump.
you see, I think we've got a lot to learn from him as a country. I mean, he puts his citizens first because he actually built a wall around Mexico, and then and then people were like, oh, he's xenophobic, and then he was like, I'm not the president of Mexico, I'm the president of America. And I think Singapore should actually do that, like give our citizens, Singaporeans, priority.
Okay. Some chat line has come to tell me you said no explanation. So okay, my apologies. Okay, next person. Who's your? Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll just say Bernie Sanders. I like all the old grandfathers. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Min Cheong.
AOC,
Sorry.
Alexandria.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Next. Charles, anybody? Or Nick?
I think I mentioned my heroes just now.
Yeah, Martin Luther King. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Nicholas?
I really look up to this guy called Sam Harris.
Who? Sorry?
Sam Harris, his activist in America.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
You're muted.
That where your motivation comes from. The next topic that I have is your views on freedom of expression in Singapore. Anyone?
May I?
Yes?
Okay, so I think that firstly, authorities shouldn't misuse their power because recently one of our political member, actually just was sharing a post which many people shared, but he got into trouble. So I think, he shared, if the government were to actually go after someone based on wrong information, I think they should actually it would be actually right to go after the content creator, the one who actually created the content, and not just the one who actually shared the post. I think there's a lot of loopholes that we can actually look into, because I think Singaporeans are now blind to see that a lot of this POFMA thing is very vague, sometimes suiting to their needs. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next topic is the kampong spirit still valid in Singapore? We are highly urbanized, first world. Anyone?
Yeah, I think it
Yes,
is
thank you.
quite relevant. Yeah, I mean, it is relevant in the sense that we want the reason why we want the kampong spirit is because the kampong spirit, or the spirit of gotong royong, which means mutual help in the day, is contrary to the kind of hyper-capitalism that the state propagates in Singapore. It is only through returning to our roots and to emphasizing this kind of idea, where kampong spirit means that we envision a duty of, to use a legal analogy, it is like the duty of care towards your neighbor and your fellow man that is recognized in a lot of major religions in the world. Like, for example, I saw that Vignes is wearing a cross. So using her as an example, I say she's a Christian. So in Christianity, they say you need to take care of your brother as yourself, and you need to really care for your neighbor and all that. So yes, the kampong spirit is, I argue that it is relevant.
Okay, thank you, Charles. 377A. Should we still retain it? Anyone? Yes, Nicholas?
I'll say repeal, basically on the fact that you can't. One of the problems with 377A is that it's supposedly a law on the books that it's not going to be enforced. The party position is that it's like a loaded gun, right? Either you fire it or you just put it down. So it's you either enforce the law or you repeal the law, and we are in favor of repeal. The main reason for this is because the government really has no business in the consenting actions of two adults in their own private space. This is really just infringement of rights, I think. So, yeah, repeal.
Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Me, myself. Are we ready for an anti-discrimination bill? Anyone?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Terence,
will speak.
go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Just to add on to what Nicholas has mentioned, there's all this kind of laws right now that I feel really is in need of a change. If we are discriminating people because of you know, be it their sexual orientation, their views on certain things, their race, even the presidential election, I felt was, you know, it's so catered to just one race, and you know, things like that just can't go on anymore. Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Nicholas, a short one. Nicholas?
I think in the sense on the extent of the anti-discrimination bill, we're talking about just anti-discrimination in terms of laws. I think, yeah, we definitely should have one. And Article 12 of the Constitution is supposed to enforce that, but doesn't cover things like sexual orientation, which people cannot control. It really should be covered under our Constitution. However, we're talking about things like anti-discrimination in terms of like hiring, free and fair hiring practices. I think there should be laws about that, but the extent of which I'm not sure you should interfere with private companies' right to hire whomever they want to hire. Yeah, so I mean, if there are laws if they cannot hire some, I mean, if there are laws if they turn away capable candidates just on basis of discrimination, because I mean, their own fault, right? Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. I've got just two more because of the time. There are a few more, but I myself will not be so excited to do all the topics, and I will dovetail it. Constitutional amendments. Do we need them? And if so, on what?
We do not need so many constitutional amendments. Can I share briefly?
Yes, short.
Okay. Yeah. The starting point for this discussion is that the Singapore Constitution has been amended many more times than, by way of you know, hard facts, you know, the Constitution in Singapore has been amended over 50 times in 50 years, but the Constitution in America has been amended 50 times in 267, I think 260 plus years. So it goes to show that, you know, when we keep on amending, what do we treat the Constitution as sacrosanct text, you know, that enshrines the fundamental liberties of the society, of everyone in the society, or we feel that it can be something amended for purposes like to shut out the leader of the PSP, you know, just because, okay, the leader of the PSP is very popular, you know, he is, you know, of course, some people view him like they, you know, he has a very high following on Instagram, and he's known as a hype beast uncle and all that. So, but they want to shut him out. The you know, the whites, sorry, I mean the incumbents want to shut him out. Therefore, they amend the Constitution, and under the guise of you know, introducing a reserve presidency, they use the Constitution amendment as a tactic to prevent, and therefore today, you know, the PSP was what I'm saying is that this cannot be a good reason to amend the Constitution. Yeah, so I'll leave you guys to share.
Okay, thank you. The last two that I have is the biggest threat that you see going forward for us as Singapore. Anyone? Yes, Min Cheong?
I think it's the idea that one singular entity or a group of people have the answers, you know, to what we want to do in the future, or have the answers in general. I mean, it's really not the case where, you know, we should be looking to one group of people, one entity, one party, you know, one category of individuals for answers. It really should be a collaborative effort. It really should be, you know, open public discourse. We should be talking to one another. We should be collaborating. We should have discussions between parties, between groups, communities, and entities. And I think we have an issue in Singapore where we look to what we believe is authority for answers before we are actually before we really look at ourselves and before we interrogate, our own communities, our the individual within, for the answers that we need. And I think it's really about, we need to change this perspective and not always look to, figures of authority for the answers. And it's really about understanding that we all have the capacity to contribute, and we all should take that as personal empowerment.
Yeah, sorry. I love how you have put it, that it is an engagement that everyone has to take. So I am going to extend my own time as a bad moderator, and I need this to be answered by anyone. Do you think we, citizens, whoever you are, student in school to somebody in their 70s and 80s, is there a good way of that we have brought them into the fold in terms of education, training courses to become more critical thinkers, etc., in terms of politics, in terms of policies, etc.? Anyone, a view from anyone?
My answer is a very hard no, but I think I'll let Terence speak first.
Oh, sure. I'll just keep it short. I feel that, thanks, Charles, to teach politics itself is not entirely necessary to me, because people can, read that on a newspaper or not. I feel what's more important is to enable people to have critical thinking, and to make sure that people are able to think out of just one narrow path, right? Because if we only follow what the books say, what the school books say, we won't be able to look at what is out there, really. Yeah. And back to you, Charles.
Okay, thank you. Charles, citizenry, how do you see it?
The main reason why education is lacking, I mean, to answer Ms. Brema's question on point, is that the reason why education is lacking in Singapore is because education is used as a tool of societal control. In order for societal control to be established, it goes back to, we can intertwine all the points that the various brilliant panelists the panelists have raised. The point, it goes back to Min Cheong's point as well, that, the idea of the issue of monopoly on ideas and appealing to authority. From a young age, education is used to, the link between this topic and Min Cheong's points is that education is used to create a society where people believe that the incumbent has a monopoly on ideas, and that the incumbent has the right to decide what is correct, and we should refer to a source of authority generally and follow and create a mechanistic society where the one at the top has the desire or has the right to control, and the lie is told that the one at the top knows best. The education system is currently not equipping people with the right to think independently, the ability to think independently. Therefore, they are not able to I'm going to close here, but it's a big problem, because the future, the economy of the future is one where we have to unlearn and relearn quickly. So if the education system of the day is causing people to become mentally rigid and dogmatic in nature, and also lack independent thinking skills, then we will become unemployable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The other last question, I'm running over time by almost 7 minutes. The biggest celebration, anyone? What do you see as our biggest celebration?
Okay, I'll speak about
Terence? Yeah.
Yeah. I think is when we have much more vibrant democracy in Singapore, when we're not just led by one single party with so few people on the other side of the fence, but whether we have at least maybe proportional representation. Now we have 61%, 39% on the other side, but we have 89% of PAP in Parliament. So if that changes, that'll be a great celebration for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for being so wonderfully collaborative and cooperative. I know I just threw things up. It's not like, hello, it's secured, as this is your final answer, because there was not enough time to elaborate, to be fair to each speaker sharing views. But I thought these are there are strands that need to be opened up and discussed further. I thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. I would like to invite Prof. Kenneth Tan here, if he has anything to share on some of the views, or do you have your own views that you would like to share? Kenneth?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thanks so much. I took a lot of notes as people were speaking and sharing their points of view. Maybe what I'll do is to kind of highlight 2 or 3 places where there are tensions of some kind that are not easy to resolve, right? For instance, there is, I think, the question of, I think it came out from your civil society provocation. What is that appropriate relationship of civil society and political parties, and how should political parties or political leadership in generally regard civil society? And I think two sort of strands emerge out of that, right? One was this idea of civil society as being representative, as somehow or other reflecting the will or the interests or the needs or the aspirations of the people, and therefore one needs to pay special attention to that very organized way of representing the will and the needs of the people. I mean, what could be more efficient than that, right? So there was that particular strand of thinking. Don't ignore civil society. And part of what is being reflected also would be those voices that tend not to be heard in our regular life, right? Because we have a particular way of living. It's I think Charles said, a hyper-capitalist way of thinking. So there are many silences and absences in our daily lives. And civil society, because they focus very deliberately on certain sectors in society that often go unnoticed, paying attention to society gives us that avenue to the blind spots that on compassionate grounds we should pay attention to, but also from practical sensibility. If we ignore those blind spots, they can come back and harm us in a very big way. So there's that one strand of thinking. There's the other strand of thinking, which I thought very, very interesting too, and it was Charles, I think, who also said this, that civil society is that vanguard for change, right? And this can sometimes be in tension with representation, right? Because civil society is not only just reflecting the feelings of people on the ground, civil society activists are also dreaming up possible better futures, right? So it's not just saying this is how we are and these are what we need and so on. It's also what should we become? What structures in our current society, what practices in our current society must we change? What must we destroy, right, in order to be something better? And that part of civil society is also very valuable, but I will just put it out there that these two things can sometimes stand in very stark tension. And then when the question of repeal 377A comes out, that straight away gives us a very good sense of where that tension lies. Because if you say civil society is representative, that line of thinking, then we have to somehow or other engage with this idea of what is the majority mood about or thinking about the question of 377A. I think we're filled with all kinds of myths about how the silent majority feels about it, but we really don't know, right? But the representative function of civil society should help us to understand that part. But we could also say, even if the majority of people felt that they were not ready, or Singapore, as we always say in Singapore, not ready for change, right? It is still civil society's vanguard role to say, then we must change, right? Then progress demands that we change, right? And that's also part of a kind of Singapore spirit, right? To kind of go against the obstacles of the present and all that. So I just put that out as one set of tension. Another set of tension that came out very interesting to me was this, and it was provoked by your question of the kampung spirit, where of course nobody would say it's a terrible thing, right, to have a kampung spirit. We all want it. We all have some maybe nostalgic vision of what it was. And then we have some kind of creative way of thinking of how we can retrieve that nostalgic vision for our contemporary, modern, hyper-capitalistic, urbanized lifestyles. But what does it mean, right, when you think of kampung spirit in the context of diversity, which is the other value that came out very strongly in your discussions, right? So then if you think of campus spirit / diversity in global city Singapore, wow, it's mind-blowing, right? So you have the desire for different points of view, diversity, multiplicity, plural voices, because it's exciting, because it's energizing, because it's the source of new ideas, innovation, resilience. We can do well economically, and it allows us to plug into the rest of the world. But at the same time, we fear it, right? Because with diversity is anarchy, with diversity is disobedience, with diversity is nobody believes what the father says anymore, right? So then we encounter that second strand, which is very important too. The idea of how do you ensure that we are sufficiently cohesive, that we are unified, we have a sense of a common basis of solidarity, right? What does it mean to be Singaporean? This is, I think, the real question of what it means to be Singaporean, that we desire the diversity, globality, independence of thinking, but at the same time, we're so worried that what's going to hold us together, right? What's going to give us reasons for having obligations to one another, moral obligations, social obligations. Why should we care for one another? So that's another sort of set of tensions I would put out there. And if I have a few seconds, maybe a third a thing that comes out also of this. And I think Min Cheong in the beginning spoke about what I thought I heard as youthful conversations, right? That a lot of the public discussions are being driven by youthful interests, young people. And the considerations being discussed in these spaces are also very youthful concerns, right? That maybe in an earlier stage of Singapore's development were not necessarily seen as very important, but today they are. And these may include even things like the workplace, right? As how not only an economic thing, but also how it affects the broader national culture, and how the broader national culture affects our engagement with one another, our engagement with our country. And so in this respect, right, it's interesting to see how we might identify bullying culture in the workplace with bullying culture in the political space, with bullying, and it's suddenly the system is easier to explain, right? Why are we the way that we are? Well, maybe it starts somewhere. We are in this hyper competitive, meritocratic workplace where bullying actually is the norm. Right? Why wouldn't we expect to find it also in the family, or expect to find it in the electoral space, and so on and so forth? So I think that's kind of a nice sort of what do you call it? Way to bring these spaces together. But I want to say also that talking about the youth, we have to engage with at least two stereotypes that have emerged out of our understanding of the millennial generation, right? One is a very pejorative notion, the easily bruised, strawberry generation, very entitled, very short-termist, and so on and so forth. But you also have another set of stereotypes, which is that, in that short-termism is actually a lot of vibrancy, energy, the ability to seek out purpose, right? Even if it's short-term, seek out purpose, and to do, and have the optimism to do something in order to achieve those purposes. What do we do with these vastly contradictory images that we have of the youth? Okay, so I just put out three sets of contradictions. Maybe you might be interested to address them in the next phase.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth. I think it's very good that you have highlighted and dealt in depth with those 3 to 4 points that you have raised. I think it's very good. I just would like to say that adding on to what you have shared, I think what is surfacing, and based also a lot on what Min Cheong has put up, that we are struggling in an osmosis, right? The web is getting more complex, and there are many levels and stratas that are emerging. And I think this is, like when I said the biggest threat, the biggest challenge, I feel it. And how are we going to traverse this such that we can get to a better place? So I'll just leave it there. And now we come, thank you very much. We come to the next part where we are going to hear from our political candidates. I hope we do not hear too much about the political party. It's not a rally, just to put that in its place. We would like to hear the planning, you know. We have shared a lot of thoughts, a lot of, much is in the head, much is in the heart, and much now is how are we going to make it happen. And I gave Marwa, what we gave was about 5 to 10 years, because we can dream till whenever, but just sort of like seeing how do we prepare, what are your preparations for the next coming GE and in another, but there's ground as well as there's political structuring, is that transformation. So these are some of the thoughts that we have put out to you, and we hope that each speaker would share that, and we'll go again in alphabetical order, and if you don't mind. And I think each person, if you are you can be slightly over the time, slightly, but if it gets too long, then I'm going to do my famous hello time to, okay? So let's hear from you, Vignes, all yours. Vigneswari, are you there? Or are you busy in the chat room? Okay. Can you please come out from the chat room to share your thoughts?
Okay, so hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm 38 years old and I'm a preschool teacher for 12 years, and I've taught in 7 different schools between the age of 2 years old and 6 years old. So I like the industry enough to see the variety and challenges in the education sector. From a very early age, children are being pushed to learn things that are beyond their comprehension. The childcare operators and mainly the curriculum guidelines from the government ministry states to teach children things that are over their caliber and learning comprehension. So children always end up like copying things that they do not understand, which defeats the purpose of education in the first place. So on the teacher's part, teachers are told to do a lot of unnecessary paperwork, especially at preschool level, that does not even aid or serve any purpose in the increased quality of the teaching. I checked with one of my friends who is a teacher assistant in a primary school, and she doesn't do half the things that I do. So I think it all goes back to the cost that the parents have to pay, because we need to show them something for the high cost that they are paying, so that the teachers get paid well. It's like a cycle. So teachers are putting in way beyond time and effort to do lesson plans, materials, reports, observations, and evaluations, and general public have no idea about this unless you are a parent yourself. So you will know what the teachers are actually doing, because most of the time you get to see what we actually produce to you. So all these paperwork take up time and leave us drained and lethargic to focus on the well-being of the children and on the quality and compromising on the quality of our teaching. So that's why you see recently there's a lot of accident cases and all that. It's not that the teacher doesn't care or the teacher is not vigilant enough. I mean, I'm not trying to advocate for negligence at the workplace, but these are how, you know, like, I do not want to mention names because I do not want to get trouble. So yeah, you can see recently there has been newspaper articles where children have been getting injured and very badly. So this could be actually the main reason, honestly speaking. So teachers are also told to bring back work home.
Okay, thanks. So I would like to hear your thoughts, the planning that you're thinking of.
Okay. So I think cutting down on paperwork is a good thing, and because it goes to show. I mean, basically, it's a trust. If you trust the teacher that she's teaching something, of course there are some teachers who might not be teaching, but I guess like we have to find a way to actually like, because if we focus too much on paperwork and then the quality of the education goes down. And furthermore, I think from the operator's operation point, their rental is actually very high. So they are overcharging parents, and when they overcharge parents are facing an increasing cost of living because they have to pay high school fees. So I feel that government should subsidize for the rental cost so that it doesn't eat up much of the wage of the parents going into their preschool fees, because they need to have a decent amount of living. I mean, government is encouraging parents, young parents to start young families, but how is that possible when the rising cost of living is like is increasing? And furthermore, we have to also fight our rice bowl with foreign talent, you see. So we also advocate for free primary school and secondary school education. So during the elections, when I brought up this topic, we do not have much time to talk at the political broadcast. So I wish to clarify this, like how we are able to, how are we going to do it? I mean, where's the money going to come from? The money is coming from the money that is going to the foreign bursaries and scholarship and subsidies. So instead of going out to not our own children, why not invest it in our primary school and our secondary school? Wouldn't that be better, like focusing on your own children instead of focusing on someone else's children? So yeah, and let me see if I've left out any point. So yeah, so I mean, if there's a demand for teachers, because now teaching career is like, you know, there's a high turnover rate. So maybe if the preschool fees is lower, and then yeah, yeah, so actually my point was also to actually increase the teachers salary, so that more teachers will actually join the industry as well. And yeah, that's it. That's about it, actually.
Right. Thank you very much, Vigneswari. I think you have raised something that is quite an important issue. We have heard a lot I think, over the last 2 years about hawkers and the whole schema around hawkers, their rentals, etc. You have put up another issue. I think that's important. I wish you the best to take it further, because right now it's a descriptive approach, but how to go further, I think is core to your work, since you're very passionate about it. So thank you very much. I have to pass it on. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Can I please ask Terence, please, to share your thoughts?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Brema. I'll just be touching on 3 segments, right? So as not to take too much time. So the first one on the role of youth, right? And in the coming years, I think all political parties, not just the big ones, but every single one, we really have to learn how to engage with the youth. That comes with youth empowerment. For example, things like we have to take ownership of what's to happen, because ultimately all the policies, every kind of bill that is passed, it affects us in some way or another, right? So we have to understand that at a fundamental level. And we also have to see the fact that, look, for youth, you don't need to join a political party as a candidate. You don't need to run in elections. You don't even need to join as a member. But I think what's very important is you understand what are all the new policies that are coming out, so that we can have a better discussion. And, you know, more discourse in politics is always very helpful. Next thing, the 5 to 10 year plan for Singapore as in a larger perspective. I think, you know, we talk a lot about the new age economy, right? A new age digital economy. We like to talk, or rather the government likes to talk about upskilling the older workers. I think what we are forgetting is that we will no doubt have some of the younger people, right? The youths who will be left behind because they might lack digitalization skills or whatever, right? So I think this is quite central to how we're going to move forward in a new digital economy, is that we have to focus a lot on education as well. Educating based on what the new economy is going to be like. You know, right now what we're seeing is why are so many jobs going to foreigners? Because they keep saying that, oh, Singaporeans can't do this job, Singaporeans don't have this skill, they don't have that skill. Essentially, what is the role of education, right? Like Vigneswari, she's so into education. The whole role of education is to prep our youth for the future jobs. And in order to do that, in order to get to the next Industry 4.0 or 5.0 or whatever number they want to give next time, in order to cater our workforce for the next generation, we have to ensure that everyone is upskilled. So there will be people, quite a substantial number of people right now, who don't have the necessary skills, and we have to pour resources into that. We cannot just keep focusing on those above 50, above 60, we also have to look at our younger population. And my third point would be something on climate change. I think just now, probably Nicholas also touched on it. I feel that right now, our efforts on climate change are, neither here nor there, right? What the government is proposing is $100 billion in 100 years. They are coming out with three main thrusts of how this climate change policy is going to work, right? They are looking at the greater southern waterfront. They are looking at imposing carbon tax and building things like the airport. They want to build it higher, on a higher elevation. I think a lot of that money will be going into actually developing a new estate, right? The southern waterfront. It's meant to make profit. It's meant to make money. And I think what we are forgetting maybe is, instead of just increasing carbon tax, right? Instead of just penalizing, right, to get more money, more revenue, we should be looking at incentivization as well, right? Things like how about all the electrification of our public transport or our private transport? Companies like Tesla, Elon Musk, they don't really like Singapore too much because of the kind of policies that we have that are essentially we are paying lip service to what climate change and environmental protection really is. So I think if the government is really serious, they have to really focus quite a bit on this issue, because what Lee Hsien Loong said is, oh, we are such a small country, we can't do much, so but we're doing a small part. I think if you are really keen on it, why not make it nationwide, right? Lead by example. And these are certain policies that I think we can really put forward in the next 5 to 10 years. You don't have to wait 80, 90 years, right? Give a 100-year plan, which I'll be dead by then, right? We have to institute change that our children can see, and that we ourselves in the later part of our lives can see as well. And that's it for me. Thank you.
So just a quick come back to what you have raised. You have raised a number of important points, but the how, it's not anymore the government, but it's about you, the young, maybe even the political party. What's your how?
Of course, well, definitely if if any of us get into parliament, but this is not an election rally, so I don't want to talk like a politician. I would like to say a lot more platforms like this. In fact, they are very important, right? We have to be able to share with our friends. We have to be able to come up with alternative policies, right? Things like, if I were just to talk about climate change, things like electrification. If you want to incentivize people, there are a whole slew of policies out there in which we can incentivize people to cut down on the kind of waste, be it whether you're looking at buying cars, whether you're looking at public transport. It's all these alternative policies that I feel are not being brought up. And what I mentioned about upskilling, right? Right now we have Skills Future. Skills Future of what, $500? I really don't think it's sufficient to make someone skilled enough to really find a job. So an alternative that I can put forward, look at what Google is doing. Now Google, they are coming out with a very different kind of system, right? They are saying that, okay, the traditional 4-year university course, it's not very relevant anymore. So what they're having is a six months career training program. They teach you the kind of skills that you really require to get this job, and you will be offered the job, rather than you go and study a very traditional university course, and that might not help you as much. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Thank you very much. I think we actually need more time to expand on quite a number of the topics, but you have highlighted and you have managed to give us some of the how. Thank you very much. The next person, who was the next? My other screen has gone dead. I think it was Nicholas. Am I right? Nicholas, are you?
Yeah, thank you, Prima. So I guess I'd like to start with one of our campaign slogans, I guess, is to be captains of our own lives. Now, this is not just a political campaign slogan. It is actually something, it's at the core of everything that we believe in. It's at the core of all our policy suggestions. It's the core of everything that we put forward. What this means is that we believe that you know better than the government about how best to live your life. The government, everyone's an individual, and the government cannot know what is best for everyone out there. That's impossible. So you know better of what kind of decisions they need to make to better your own lives. And to that end, I would like to touch on 2 points. First, empowering our youth and giving them more options. Now, this is all part of being able to be a captain of your own life. The Singaporean youth are not apathetic by nature. I think we have seen that during the GE, where a lot of youth have come forward. They question our, in fact, the largest portion of our volunteers come from the youth portion. So the Singaporean youth are definitely not apathetic. They look at our charter, they question our charter, and they want to know more about our policies. So they're not apathetic, but they have been educated to be apathetic. When you tell people that their worth is measured in terms of academic excellence and what their salary is like and that's their value, you educate people to become apathetic. You tell them not to question the system, because you tell them that the best way forward is to keep your head down, not question the system, just go through the system and you will be successful. That is the wrong way of doing things, I think, in Singapore. The youth from other countries, they are not more empowered than Singaporean youth. They are not somehow more empowered than us. They just haven't been disempowered by their system. What I mean is this: it's not just enough to be the best in science or the best in math anymore, not by any kind of metric. We need to educate our youth in skills of critical thinking, in skills of debate, public speaking. We do our youth a great disservice by not teaching them these things. We need a more flexible curriculum where the youth get to choose what they are interested in studying. We need to engage them from a young age to be politically interested in issues, national issues, things like social studies curriculum. What it is important to learn the history. History can only tell you what not to do. Again, it cannot tell you where to go from there. So things like our national issues, our current national issues, should be educated to the youth. Youth should be educated about things, issues which concern them, things that they might be interested in. We need to empower them to ask questions, not shut them down. We should cut back on the amount of OB markers.
Yeah, Nicholas, I just want to come on what you are sharing. We have, this has been said before, critical thinking, etc. We have to get them to get onto the role and everything. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how do we do it?
Certainly, I'm going to get there. So things like in your curriculum, your social studies curriculum, for example, when you teach people about history, instead you should be teaching youth about current affairs issues which affect them, interest them, and they naturally will be more interested to ask questions. We should cut back the amount of OB markers in Singapore. So things like climate change rally, King Dot, these are very good examples of things that youth are very interested in and they want to participate in. But there's a real chilling effect when the government summons in. So there was an incident where a couple of students, they took pictures outside the ExxonMobil building with placards. And there's a real chilling effect when you summon these people in for questioning, police questioning, and you're basically signaling to everyone that these are not questions that you should be asking, these are not things that you should be doing. And I think the government should be more open, and they should encourage more conversation instead of cutting it back. One of the things that we have seen around the world this year is that when you shut down conversation, there's a very real chance that people resort to other means to be heard. I'm not saying that Singapore is very close to the rioting that we see in US or Hong Kong, but we do see that might be the eventual outcome of when people feel that they are not heard. So to that end, I think that we need to open up more spaces for debate, open up more spaces where people can talk about issues which they're interested in. One of our volunteers, she's still studying, she told us that she felt like there were very little spaces outside of school where she had the opportunity to talk about issues which interested her, issues which she was concerned about. So to that end, this is actually one of the goals of Red Dot United. We actually want to foster an active citizenry. And one of the things that we've been doing is that we want to hold more dialogues, to open more conversation. And in fact, we've already started. Last month, we just had a dialogue on ministerial salaries, and later this month we'll be talking about free and fair elections, not just in Singapore, but everywhere in the world. And currently we are restrained by by the rules imposed by the by COVID-19, understandably so. Maybe as we move towards phase 3, we can have bigger events, better events where people can where we can invite more people to share their views. The thing about politics is that it affects everyone. It permeates every facet of life, and we want to make politics accessible to all. We want to make it a subject which is not taboo to discuss. We want to make it even maybe enjoyable for people. And people have the right to ask questions. They should be empowered to ask these questions. And yeah, thank you. That's our platform.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Quite a canvas, and you also shared that the dialogues have begun, and the engagement, and COVID-19 is quite a challenge. Yes, thank you very much. Can we hear from Cheong, please?
Hi. Okay, so I think a lot of what we've been discussing revolves around what kind of society do we want? And I think that requires us to participate. But in order for that to happen, I think people need to feel that they have a platform and a voice in order to express their thoughts. And they don't have, and I think they need to feel that doing so wouldn't be a dangerous affair. It wouldn't, they need to feel safe in order to express. And I think that's very important. And I think that's the kind of environment that we need to be creating, which is that discussion is encouraged, your views are important and valued, and even if you don't get it right the first time, and even if you have controversial perspectives, it's important to get them out, because we will never know what kind of society we want, and we'll never know how we're going to craft this future of ours if we don't actually have challenging or difficult conversations, or conversations that are a little bit less safe or less conventional. We will find that middle ground, but we do need to have those conversations. And I agree a lot with what Nicholas said about critical thinking. I actually was a varsity debater, and I feel like that really, it made me think a lot about different issues, not just like in politics, but social issues as well. But it also gave me the skills and the framework for which I moved forward to be able to think about different things in a whole array of issues. So I think critical thinking is really important, and I think we should encourage that in schools. We should have it could be just debate classes, right? Debate training in schools. And that's really important. I know that that's something that the establishment may not be too keen on, because thinking population is also one that's a little bit contentious. But we do need to give people a voice. And I think that is the only way to engage your citizenry. And that's the only way you can actually connect with them, because you give them that platform to express themselves, and you give them that legitimacy, of being and of self. And that's really, really crucial. So, and we see that youth, I think, especially in these elections, and people in general have been looking for mature discussions. They're not looking for mudslinging. That doesn't interest them. I mean, it may be sensationalist. It may, spark a lot of articles on social media. But essentially, I think youth especially are looking for discussions that are constructive. Because if we don't, if we are not able to argue our points, or we're not able to communicate in a way that's convincing, then that's not something that is going to resonate with, with the youth or with the population as a whole. And so, and I think that kind of also touches upon, education and jobs. And I think we need to kind of redefine what it means to live a successful life. And it also means broadening, like what we communicate or what we indicate is important or is valuable in society. So, and I think education at heart should not just be about preparing people for the economy, although that is important, but I think crucially, and this ties into critical thinking and debating skills, education should be about equipping people with the skills to learn how to learn, so that you can carry forward, with the framework and the skills in order to acquire new knowledge. And I think it's really, really important that we create an environment where asking the whys beneath the whys is habituated. So it's not just asking whys and not just stopping at the first layer, but to keep questioning. And I think that's a good thing. Many people, I feel, are a little bit put off by the idea of questioning, and they believe that that is it's confrontational to keep asking, to keep challenging. But I think that's the only way we'll actually find middle ground, we'll find consensus, and we'll be able to, really build this society where everyone feels engaged. And when that happens, actually, that's where this kampong spirit actually springs forth. So I think that's something that's quite crucial.
One short intervention. How? How?
So, well, I mean, I think it would be looking at education policies for a start, because I think that's where, in our formative years especially, but throughout our education journey, that's where we are always finding ourselves. So when we're young, preschool age, formative years, it's really important to make people, children feel safe enough to be themselves, to express themselves. So that's really crucial. But moving forward, into primary and secondary school, I think that's where we need to also encourage our, youths to think and to feel safe expressing themselves. They'll get it wrong sometimes, but that's fine, and I think that's part of learning and growing. And then when you move forward into, the tertiary education, that's where you really start to, really find a little bit more of a groundedness in who you are and what you want to do and contribute. And I think also in that, at that stage of life and at that stage of education, it's important to provide options and important to encourage people to pursue what they really believe in. So to say that, maybe we've identified a certain sector like digital, services as the way forward in our economy. But if you're not interested in that, then don't go into it, right? Find something that you're really passionate about. And that's where you can, and if that's where you feel you can contribute, go for that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Min Cheong. And we have the final person, Charles, could you please?
Yes, very good. So I just wanted to begin by saying that, I was really very heartened by listening to each and every of the speaker, because they really raised a lot of points that I mean, there was not a single point that I disagreed with, but I want to begin by addressing, the few of the points. You see, first of all, I think the education system, to begin with Vignes's point, the education system is one where people do not feel passionate or learn for learning's own sake, but they learn for the sake of mugging and regurgitating. And in the hope that, the education system is very instrumentalist in nature, but it doesn't focus on the intrinsic joy of learning. And therefore, when a person becomes older, the learning that he has so-called engaged in is illusory. He didn't really learn because he didn't really concern himself with what is the spirit of learning. And why is it that he doesn't have that ability to learn? It is because like what Min Cheong said, the definition of a successful life is a very narrow definition, which focuses on personal wealth. So according to this standard, amongst the five of us, perhaps, according to the state's definition, only Terence would be the definition of a successful person. But let me get further. You see, Terence has raised a very powerful point, which is that we are out of sync with the wider progressive world. And Elon Musk does not take us seriously, because in the wider progressive world, for example, in the state, even people who are successful would have to work in tandem with people that, we are not saying that everyone may necessarily, we are not trying to promote a communist society, but we are trying to say that we must, the point which I find a very powerful point raised at Terence is that we must evaluate where we are with reference to the wider world. For a long period of time, right, Singapore has used this narrative of a vulnerable society to scare people into thinking that there is only one way. Now, the society is progressing. More and more people are rejecting the state narrative, which was outlined by Nicholas and Min Cheong at length. Even those who are privileged or who would have served the state in yesteryear, like, persons that are at a higher tier of the society. I shall not, but the idea is that more and more people are able to think independently, and even members of the higher tier of society, like, I mean, according to this very toxic state narrative that is presented by the state, various persons like accountants, lawyers, doctors, pilots, engineers are at the top of the societal pyramid. And it goes back to Professor Kenneth's point about the the education system, and we must understand workplace bullying, a stressful workplace culture in the context of the bullying politically that is done against people that want to speak up, people that want to share alternative voices like Jonathan, people that, you know, because according to this state narrative, it is that, you know, the people at the top have the right to bully since the time of, you know, J. Ratnam, since the time of Dr. Lee Siew Chow, since the time of people, anyone that dared to speak up was bullied. Even until today, the bullying continues in the sense that we are not in sync with the wider world. Let me give a concrete example from the field of law. Okay, for example, in the context of law, because I know a lot of the questioners were asking about that. In Singapore, they strike the balance in favor of you know, protecting the minister's reputation. But if you look at other jurisdictions like in America, and there is a freedom. There is the judiciary that has consistently held that when there is a conflict between the right of the people to speak up and the right of the public to hold the politician to account versus the politician's right to protection of his own reputation, the former must be more important. So we are already out of sync with the rest of the world. Like when we look at Canada and when we look at Canada, for example, the Canada Supreme Court, you know, in the case of Grant and Tosta Corp 2007, if you go and Google, they already said they recognize the right of the public interest, you know, that generally in striking the balance. Of course, I will not bore you guys now with a legal thesis and to discuss and all that, but it goes back to Terence's point that we are out of step with the world. That is why Elon Musk and all that would not take Singapore seriously, and Singaporeans will continue to take themselves seriously and think that they are very good and very efficient and that the society is ordered in an efficient manner. But we need to look and think carefully whether or not we are really in sync with, and of course we have done certain things well, but we cannot reject the need to be in sync with the rest of the world and stop thinking that we have a monopoly on what is, you know, that a certain group or certain political party has the right to say, to dictate, okay, that you are measured by how much wealth you have. You are measured by how well you did in school. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to end off this discussion by saying that ironically, many people who are in the elite have started to realize that they are not equipped, that the way the society is going down, this track of hyper-capitalism, this track of, you know, the persons at the top have all the answers, is not sustainable and would lead Singapore to ruin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a comeback for you, Charles. I think it's good that you mapped the global, you did the globalization and mapping it on and how we are part of a whole system. But I would still like to hear from you how you are thinking about preparing for the next 5 to 10 years. How do you bring this out? Could you say something about that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, just to say very shortly, my concrete plan to address all this is really, I mean, I believe that education in Singapore is lacking in 3 respects. The first is I would propose a 3-fold model, you know, reform of education, where the first part of education would be emphasizing community service. So I would require, the amount of hours that people have to clock would be increased, and also they would have to decide what kind of community service that they want to organize, that they want to do within various, of course, defined limits. Secondly, we must introduce a subject, like what Nicholas was saying, we must broaden even if we do not introduce it formally, we must ensure that there is a subject that such as like epistemology, or, you know, like theory of knowledge, like people are able to think, to engage meta issues of knowledge. Like, why do we know what we know? Why should I agree with what you say? It goes back because a lot of the people that I've met that are liberal or progressive in their views, had a kind of background like in Cheong's. Like they engage in some kind of debating and all that. And later on they realize that, you know, the state is saying something for the sake of that. We must analyze deeply what are the vested interests of the stakeholders and the incumbent when they say what they want to say. Yeah. So other than that, the third reform I would propose to conclude is that we must allow students a wider range of subjects that they can choose from, so that they will take ownership of their own learning, and they have to do a project in each and every subject, and they have to define their own learning, so that they take ownership of the learning and no longer adopt the GTM, which is go through motion. Everyone knows go through motion refers to the very Singaporean way, which is very regrettable, that people feel that they are doing for the sake of doing, but did not really take ownership of what they are doing or what they are learning.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry if I've been a bit insistent on the how, because a lot of this is known, but what are the ground plans? And the common refrain, the refrain is education. And therefore, I'm glad you mentioned it, Charles, that some of it may not be able to take place within the formal structures. Maybe the alternative has to happen. And if the alternative, how, there are questions that are emerging here. I'm also looking at the chat room, and one of the more important questions that's emerging is how to get the youths themselves, even in an informal approach, on an informal route, to come in and sign up for this kind of things, because time is limited, right? The formal curriculum, the expectations, I think it was you, Terence, or Nicholas, that mentioned about, and also Charles, the success formula. And I think Vignes here brought up a very important point about early childhood, how important it is that in the early ages, we are already instilling a very good point, a very good way that you said it actually, Charles, intrinsic joy of learning. I think that is the tool that we need to develop, right? So I thank you very much for your thoughts. I know it is, listening to you all, I'm doing my own critical evaluation. It's quite a big whammy of a job to give, like, hello, what, but it's also interesting that a lot of it has come back to rest quite strongly on education in the broad terms, and how do we bring them into a higher, bring everyone that we want on board into a higher level of awareness, critical thinking, discerning, to become discerning, etc. Yep, so thank you. I now ask kindly upon Prof. Kenneth Paul Tang to share his views. Thank you. Kenneth?
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. What so many fertile points made in the course of this last hour, and of course in the earlier hour as well. I wouldn't know where to start, but if I were to try and maybe thread a kind of narrative through what's been said, maybe I might focus on this broader notion of civic education that seems to resonate with what most of you, if not all of you, have raised in your thoughts about going forward, right? And I was quite struck, and I will begin with the point made by Nicholas about how the old-fashioned notion of empowering young people, or people in general, right, with critical thinking skills, the questioning of authority, the opportunities, platforms, spaces for making known what we are nervous and worried and concerned about, may not destabilize society, but it may actually do the reverse, which is to stabilize society, because it provides these spaces where problems can be seen, understood collectively, and then addressed collectively too. So if we start thinking about civic education from that point of view, it that it is in fact a stabilizing, resilience generating type of activity, it might not scare quite so many people, right? And so where is this scare coming from? Because I think Bremer is also correct that as everyone has said on this panel, critical thinking is key. I cannot imagine anybody at all, right? Even the most conservative person in the establishment or out of the establishment actually saying that, oh, we mustn't have critical thinking. I think everybody would like to have that, but they have a different view of what critical thinking means. Right? So for the longest time, it's been a very constrained idea of critical thinking. Critical thinking means I give you the question or I give you the problem and you think critically about the various means of solving that problem or that puzzle, right? For instance, we have a problem with inequality. Okay, can you now come up with a creative, critical, but technical approach to solving it? And that actually, I think, characterizes a lot of how we mostly understand critical theory. It's a technical process. Even the universities, right, as exalted as they might seem to be, actually, there's a hierarchy, right? And the hierarchy is science over arts and humanities, technical over all else, right? To such a point that you know, when you look at universities today, our universities today, you hardly see the civic element in it at all. And I don't mean like courses on civic education, but just that sense in which education is also education for the citizen, right? It's not just education for the worker or education for the captain of industry or whatever it is. There's something that's very absent there. And I think the absence reflects this notion of critical thinking or criticality as being a technical enterprise. So what's missing when we think of critical thinking as technical? Well, critical thinking in the moral sense, critical thinking in the ethical, philosophical sense, critical thinking in the aesthetic sense, right? Why is it that we hold up poetry and think that it's subversive in a place like Parliament? I mean, because somehow or other, we haven't mastered the critical sensibilities, aesthetic sensibilities to understand what poetry does, to understand what the arts do, right? They are not there to destabilize society, but they're there to prompt us, provoke us to think about alternative worlds, alternative possibilities. But the moment we limit our education system to thinking critically about technical things, we lose the navigational capacity to question what is beautiful, what are assumptions about what is good and what is moral, right? So I agree with what you're saying in that education system, everybody has embraced the language of critical thinking, but very few actually apply it in such a way as to extend it beyond the technical, and in such a way as to say, when you're thinking critically, you not only think critically about answering the question, you're thinking critically about questioning the question as well. Now, of course, when you start questioning the question, it goes to, it matters to authority figures in education, right? It's scary to a teacher when the students are encouraged and drawn into that activity and rewarded for questioning the question, because it takes a very, very confident and masterful teacher to stand in front of a class and welcome criticism, right? And welcome, you know, and we know that you know, some of the most exalted leaders, the most progressive leaders may think that they welcome criticism, but when they hear it, they can't take it, right? They crumble, and then when they crumble and don't know what to turn to, they become violent and brutal, and they become intolerant, right? And so, I guess what I'm saying is, whilst we recognize, most of us, that we have to expand critical thinking, we must encourage our students to question the question and question the questioner. At the same time, we got to make sure that that space of learning doesn't crumble after that into an even worse authoritarian space, right? We have to make sure that there are enough resources. Teachers, for example, how prepared are they to talk about current affairs in a way that's not propagandistic and according to the script, right? How prepared are they? Maybe some are, but I bet a whole lot of people are terrified at the prospect of opening up conversations which they then lose control of and don't know how to handle after that. And remember also that our classrooms, you know, just as our students are becoming more exposed and more enlightened and more open to different, you know, they become more awoken, right? As we say, they understand a lot more than we think. And which also means that they may have a variety of views, some of which may be hard to reconcile if you're not, again, a skilled teacher, or some of which may be very triggering for other students too. So part of this is not only equipping the teacher with the knowledge and the open-mindedness to handle criticality, but also to maintain a space that is safe. Many of you talked about safe spaces. I think that's very important today. And partly it's about narratives that come into this space that may be very triggering to particular students who've experienced traumas in their past, and of course the other element of bullying, right? So when the bullying culture enters into this classroom where we are encouraging everyone to be critical and the teacher's not entirely sure how to handle this, you might get a very augmented practice of bullying, right? And what do you do about that? So I think my point is all of this is great, but there's a lot that has to go into not just the curriculum, what to teach and what critical thinking skills are outcomes, but also the capacities of the teacher, the capacities of the classroom and the institution to create a really safe space, not just one where you can loosely talk about many different things, but one that is respectful of the dignity of every student and is very mindful of the traumas that each student has faced in their lives, right? And now our classrooms are also so unequal, right? There's students who come from very privileged backgrounds and others who don't. So when we think about critical thinking and even civic education as a broader application of civic thinking, in what sense can we prevent that from also becoming an elitist space? Those who can handle critical thinking perhaps come from a privileged background where that is more normal and that's easier to do, right? What about the students who don't have as much time or bandwidth to engage with critical thinking at a level that is acceptable to us? So how do we make sure that civic education and all these capacities are important to make the citizen, to make the socially progressive member of our industry? How do we make sure that we're not also generating a new layer of elitism that will cancel Nicholas's point at the beginning, which is this should all be in the interest of stabilizing our society so that we can be the people that we want to be, right? Rather than creating new divisions, new elitisms, and new privileges that are completely out of our control. Maybe I'll kind of stop there.
Oh, thank you, Kenneth, very much for that, because I think what you did was to give the nuts and bolts to what everyone is very keen to do. And I've also looked through the chat questions. There are very strong questions also emerging about education outside of the current mainframe. How to do that, how to engage, how to get another discourse going on in that arena. And I think you have highlighted perhaps also how the preparedness level of us to really do a good job in critical discourse is equally important. And I think right now, what you brought to my mind personally, I'm responding to you, sorry, is that I watched the recent parliamentary proceedings with a lot of interest. That is going to be a way of highlighting the space that one can have at the national level. If that space becomes crippled and becomes involved in minutiae all the time, then I think emblematically, we are going to be shortchanged on what are the possibilities, you know. And I always feel that one of the best parliamentary proceedings I have ever seen is the Hutton inquiry that took place in UK, where the then Prime Minister Tony Blair, after receiving the document and everything, had to face tons of questions in Parliament. And I thought the questions were super sharp. People had read the document and all. And I think that is the level of what you are saying, questioning the questioner. To be able to do that, it's not flippant, it is an engaged process. And so I think you have put it succinctly that we need good, then I'm calling it the nuts and bolts and the mindscape. Which I think Charles really expanded by drawing in a lot of examples from all over that he has read. I just want to go to two questions that have emerged. I thank everybody one of the questions that has emerged comes from should I name the person, because I didn't make this clear, but you can see it also from Miss Lily Chung. She would like to know from anyone on the panel, what is Singapore core to you? You know, her example that she gave is that her core is reduced class size to 15 per teacher. I mean, as an example, what is your core, Singapore core to you? I thought it was quite interesting, like a rapid response. Anyone? Anyone? What is Singapore core to you? If it can be like from that expense coming. Yes, Charles, thank you.
Singapore core to me is really the ethos of hard work, and or rather resilience in general, despite and the idea that I think these are factors that these are things that we have done well, in the sense that the Singaporean core, and it reflects, for better or for worse, an ethos of subservience. And also, I mean, it sounds quite bad, but of course we want to be objective, and we have to recognize that there are some good things that came out of this, such as economic productivity and generally what has been termed a new proprietarianism. I noted this is one of the comments in the section as well. That's why I suddenly brought it up. Not that I wanted to bring it up, but it is a comment by To Ying Xiang. Yeah. So the question is, is whether the Singaporean core, which began as a kind of belief in meritocracy, has moved beyond meritocracy to a new proprietarianism kind of approach, which is discussed by Piketty, in his, and without like trying to act chim or what. The idea is that we want to, do people deserve the station that they are in life currently, and if they do, and what is the minimum standard that we must ensure that everyone in society is able to live able to live in such a in what is the minimum standard that he is able to live in. And we have to forge a new consensus, because I think that the society is starting to, of Singapore, is that it goes back to one point that Professor Tan raised earlier, which is about, I do not remember, it wasn't Professor Tan who raised it, but he said that it's something like a shifting or whoever it was. I know one amongst all of us said that earlier, but that is, to me, what the Singaporean core reflects, a kind of communitarianism, which is, and also a deference to authority. But we must ensure that the Singaporean core is not too out of sync with the wider progressive ethos that the world is moving towards. Because all of us will agree, even the PAP agrees. The PAP has stated many times that the world is going to move towards a rejection of globalization. The PAP is very well aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I've looked at the questions. I think quite a number have been addressed here and there, and I think Prof. Kenneth Tan, as the discussant, has answered very clearly, summarizing the views of the speakers, as well as adding onto some of the key points raised on education. But Charles, in closing just now, I think there was no time to really discuss, and how do we shift from globalization to regionalization? What is the focus, or more national activities? I think all these are the very big questions that I think we have to engage in. The neoliberal order, right? We are all stuck with that, which was one of the questions. We haven't done really a good and there's no time, a good discussion on the mapping of unmet social needs over the years, because it's a dynamic thing. Some of the basic needs are still not being met, and there are new needs that have emerged. And our core tenets that we have said are our pillars, can our pillars still stand strongly? So there are many things that need a lot of unpacking to be repackaged into workable solutions, hopefully that can meet more people's needs. I think we have to be able to be in a situation to meet people's basic needs. Otherwise, it is not good for any country, it's not good for any government, it's not good for any society or community. So I am left with the task of trying to get everything into some little kind of nuggets, which I will try. I think what has emerged is a strong engagement that we need to get a greater commitment into the public arena on alternative routes to creating ground up critical discourses and having the technical skills to do them well, which also means as a society, our own minds have to become wider and more open, which finally ends on that last point that I want to make, our evolving democracy. And the space, as Min Cheong has put it somewhere quite clearly, that it is okay to have different views. It is okay if we do not agree on each other's views, but we develop an approach of working with different views for a greater whole. I think this is one of the core that I feel we need to engage on, because we keep seeing things in a box still. The box is no longer applicable on most fronts. So what else to say but to thank Laika in Philippines, Benedict, who has been privately messaging me many things. This social media is like many faces. And to thank all of you for giving so much time to this, and to thank all participants and those who are watching Facebook. I hope we are walking away with the most important takeaway. Let's get critically engaged and let's appreciate diversity in views, and that planning for 5 to 10 years is crucially important. Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you Vignes, thank you Terence, thank you Nicholas, Min Cheong, Charles, and thank you Kenneth. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. See you.
Okay, somebody has to